gummy bear.
It's the internet, you're busy, let's do this for October 12th, 2022. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, you can now lock yourself in a VR helmet where you can work professionally in an office with cat girls. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Andy Robinson from Video Games Chronicle. Andy, how are you doing?
Doing excellent, mate. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really happy to have you on here. We reference your stories all the time. You guys do exactly the kind of video game news coverage that I love, where you're very fast, you're very quick, you're very thorough, but you also push the conversation forward, which I just can't say enough how much I appreciate, where you find what people are talking about, and then you also find what people are going to be talking about next and cover that stuff. So I guess thank you for your service. I really appreciate what VGC does.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say.
Absolutely.
It was very inspirational to kind of see your work as well from my perspective, kind of working, old school magazines and websites. And I went into game dev for a bit and came back. And when I came back, YouTube was a thing before. Suddenly you've got this kind of business journalist who's showing that you can kind of bridge the gap and you can educate a consumer audience on, kind of expert subjects and do something a little bit in between. And that was really kind of inspirational for what we wanted to do as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a gap for a while where just explaining gaming in a really plain way was absent, where we're just like, gamers don't care about that. I think what we've discovered over the last couple of years is gamers really care about all of these minute details. There was just no direct path to get that from access, from saying, hey, a publisher, go ahead and tell me exactly what you're thinking. They don't want to do that. So we just kind of have to go get it ourselves. And I think it's paid dividends, and also I think it's created a more interesting landscape for video game coverage. But I think what's most important is what I've been told is that you knew a very young Timur Hussein who was trying to break into the video game coverage business and video games media. And I want to know, what was he like? How did he embarrass himself? Did he step on any rakes? Do you have any war stories about Timur that you could share?
I can feel. I mean, he was a great young journalist, right? I mean, we gave him work experience. We were on CVG, which not a lot of people across the pond are very aware of, but it's a very old kind of like it's the oldest games publication in the world. It's 1981, yes, so it's very famous in the UK for anyone like over 25, right? Because we worked on that and it closed at Future, and then we kind of went away separate ways. So Timur went to GameSpot, I went into to game development and ended up doing VGC. So yeah, no, he joined us. I don't know, like maybe like 2010, 2011 time. He'll probably correct me on that. And the thing that I loved about Timur then is what I still look for in a young writer. And he reminded me of myself as well, right? And it's that he loves the games media, right? He has a real passion for covering games. And that's kind of what you look for sometimes. It sounds obvious, but some people come in and they love games. Yeah. I just want to go and see that game, want to go and play that game, rather than loving the craft, loving reporting games, being passionate about how can we improve our output. And, very quickly you could say to him, like, give him responsibility and go, hey, like, just go and run this thing, run our social media, kind of run our video. And it's not a surprise kind of seeing where he is today. Yes, having kind of seen the seeds kind of spout and whatever other cliche I can come up with.
The cliche. He's a go-getter, right? Like you could tell. You just, like you said, we should be doing this, and he'll take it on. He'll do it.
The guy's moved to the States, right? He's taken on the opportunity, head on, gone out there and done it.
And we don't make it easy for him. We don't here, but he's still done it. So
he loved Giant Bomb even back then. He used to absolutely love Giant Bomb. This is like maybe almost 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was really great to get to meet him in person for the first time last week. It was my first time meeting Tam, and at least as far as I can remember. But we got to hang out and work on this, and I'm like, oh yes, he really is just who I thought he was in terms of someone who, like you said, loves games coverage and loves the conversation around games as much as anything else. So it's cool to see that you guys have that history together and that you guys are both still making it happen. All right, we should get into this show, but before we get into the mess, let's explain what we do here. Each weekday, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, hello Twitch. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Microsoft accuses UK regulator of adopting Sony's complaints over the Activision Blizzard deal. This comes from our friend Andy Robinson over at VGC. In September, the Competition and Markets Authority said in an inquiry into the $69 billion merger that had officially been expanded into a second phase due to a number of antitrust concerns. On Wednesday, the CMA detailed in full its reasoning for those concerns, including the impact of competition in the console, game streaming, and subscription spaces. We'll get into like some of the more of the details here, but this is a story that's been ongoing. We keep checking in on it. I had a hunch pretty early on that this felt like a Jim Ryan defending his home territory and thinking like, okay, if I could probably get pretty cozy with the people that make decisions here, and this is my best bet to play defense. I should put all of my eggs into this basket. Do you get that sense that that's what happened with the CMA, or is there something else happening here? Because I mean, it really does feel like they are adopting the complaints exactly like this story says.
I think you're half right, which is Sony are definitely concerned about, in particular, the UK market, but especially this whole situation, right? I mean, if it wasn't obvious for anyone watching at home, both companies are actively briefing kind of business journalists, analysts, market analysts. There's a reason that you're seeing these stories come out, kind of every other week. There's a reason why this morning a Microsoft response has gone up immediately, syndicated from lots of different journalists. That's kind of not out there. They are actively kind of briefing on this. It is a kind of a war of words, so to speak.
I mean, it's the art of war sort of stuff where they are employing every trick that they can to win the battle without actually having to fight the battle. They're trying to win it before it's actually in any sort of final mediation at a regulator. They're trying to make those divide and conquer all these things. They are trying to play all these tricks, and it's really obvious. But they also have no choice, right? There's a lot of money on the line for both these companies.
And to answer your question, though, what makes the CMA, the UK regulator, unique? Really, there's been a lot of talk about like the Brazilian regulator and the Saudi Arabia regulator. Don't really matter as much as these big guys. If Saudi Arabia or kind of the other guys kind of rejected the deal, that'd probably be a problem with them doing business in this territory. But when you're talking about the UK, Europe, the FTC, and the US, they're really guys who can kind of really take this deal down, so to speak. And the reason that the UK, I think, is a particular battleground right now is just because it's seen as really unpredictable. I don't know if you've been following UK politics for the last 5 years, but the UK is quite unpredictable right now.
Yeah.
Like, as someone who's trying to do his mortgage this week, I can tell you, like, we don't know what is going on.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible.
It is very terrible. So that's really the gist of it, I think, is that they kind of view the UK over. They'll be most concerned about the big three, right? The FTC, the EU, and the CMA in the UK. And the CMA will be of particular concern because it really is like the UK has been the outlier for a little while now. They're outside of the EU. What are they going to do?
Yeah, they're the wild card.
Exactly. If they were the ones to go, you know what, we're gonna kind of be the rebels, it would probably be them.
Hey, do you think it's suspicious that they've adopted so much of what Sony has taken on as a complaint? Because I mean, like you said, Brazil. Doesn't matter in the grander scheme here. If they would have denied the deal, Microsoft would have just found a way to make concessions, and it would have been fine. It would not have caused them much trouble. But the Brazilian regulator was like, "Hey, it's not our position to defend Sony in the marketplace. This is still not going to cause enough of a shakeup that we're going to feel like anything is truly anti-competitive with this deal." And that seems to be the stance that most regulators are taking. Most other companies competing in the space are also taking that stance. So is it suspicious that CMA is echoing Sony so much in terms of what the concerns are?
I mean, to me, I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is the missing sentence between the two is that one where they kind of point out and say, well, it's not our job to worry about whether this deal is bad for you. It's to worry about whether it's bad for the whole market. I think broadly what they say, from my point of view, looks quite similar. And I agree with what they say as well. And obviously, Microsoft says that they're not going to make, I mean, it's centered on Call of Duty, right? Microsoft says they're not going to make Call of Duty exclusive. It doesn't make sense for us. And they're right. Like, the biggest loser if they made it exclusive is going to be Microsoft. But the interesting thing in the CMA docs that came out this morning that I thought was when you saw Sony kind of move away from the exclusivity talk, start to talk about the issue of like differentiation of the product, right?
Right.
Like they could make exclusive content on this, they could do this and that. I mean, it's been picked up a lot by the social media and stuff, right? Because broadly, they speak quite broadly about it, and it kind of looks like they're really pointing out that something that Sony already has in place, a marketing deal. But I think the bigger issue here, and always has been the real cusp of this deal, that Microsoft is the biggest game on PlayStation for the last decade every year is Call of Duty.
Yes.
That's now going to be owned by Xbox if this goes through.
Yes.
So the idea that they would pull that from PlayStation is almost farcical, because they've now got the biggest game on PlayStation as an advert for Xbox, for Xbox Game Pass.
I mean, it's like, the more successful Sony is, the more money Microsoft makes, like intrinsically to owning Call of Duty, because you get 70%, Sony gets 30%. So you sell more PlayStations, that sells more Call of Duties. Inherently, Microsoft makes more money in that deal when it comes to Call of Duty. So why would they? Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
It's absolutely right. I mean, this gets compared a lot to, like kind of Disney buying Star Wars or Marvel. But the thing is, there are millions of people out there that probably just play Call of Duty, right?
Yes, there are.
There probably aren't millions of people that just watch Star Wars or just watch Marvel. Yeah. And if you're one of those people, I mean, I play Call of Duty, right? And I've got lots of friends who play Call of Duty but don't really play much else. And this conversation comes up, like, if you go and buy an Xbox, you can just get this as part of your subscription. What? Really? Like, that's what's really going to sway that. That's the real issue here. That if you're one of these guys paying $70 for Call of Duty on PS5, I mean, they're right. They said in their wording today, we think it's really likely that this is going to affect kind of people's console choices, and I think it will.
Yeah, we actually have those bits right here. Let me read some of this. Let's see. Responding to CMA's decision, Microsoft has now called the regulator's concerns misplaced and claimed that it adopts Sony's complaints without the appropriate level of critical review. This is a quote from those documents. In short, Sony is not vulnerable to a hypothetical foreclosure strategy, and the referral decision incorrectly relies on self-serving statements by Sony, which significantly exaggerate the importance of Call of Duty to it, and neglect to account for Sony's clear ability to competitively respond. While Sony may not welcome increased competition, it has the ability to adapt and compete. Gamers will ultimately benefit from this increased competition and choice. And then, to your other point, and this is from another story you posted today, Sony has separately told the CMA in an explanatory document that Call of Duty fans are likely to switch to Xbox even if the game isn't exclusive. And another quote from those documents, SIE told the CMA that even if Call of Duty games remained available on PlayStation following the merger, the merged entity would still be able to engage in partial foreclosure by increasing the differentiation between the versions of Call of Duty available on Xbox and on PlayStation. According to SIE, gamers may expect that Call of Duty on Xbox will include extra content and enhanced interoperability with the console hardware, in addition to any benefits from membership in Xbox Game Pass. SIE submitted that these factors are likely to influence gamers' choice of console. I think that Sony is accurately portraying what is likely to happen once this deal closes in these sentences here. And this description of a possible future, I think they are right. I just don't know if that rises to the occasion of calling in a government regulator to stop a deal. That seems where it kind of gets preposterous to me. I don't know.
I totally agree. I think the bottom line is, I think both of what a lot of both companies say is true.
Yes.
The real issue for the regulator here is not to work out whether this affects, if this deal hurts PlayStation, because it definitely does. It's their biggest selling game, and it's going to turn into a Game Pass advertisement. They're there to decide whether this hurts the entire market, whether it's unfair, and that is something that's a little more difficult to work out. And you see that kind of littered in their kind of documents they put out today on their decision to kind of expand the inquiry. And they talk not just about PlayStation, they talk about Amazon, Google, Nvidia. The real question here is not whether it hurts PlayStation, and I think it's more the stick of this deal could be in, well, in 10 years' time, if consoles don't exist, does Call of Duty make the difference between Microsoft being the absolute, uncontestable player in the game streaming market versus kind of the other guys, or does it not? And that's going to be really, really difficult for them to kind of argue and work out, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's so impossible to predict where the console business is going to be in 10 years. 2 years, okay, we can have that conversation. I think 25 years, I think we can even have that conversation where it's going to be completely different. People are going to be playing the power of streaming from the cloud, or streaming from, or just rendering stuff on a local mobile phone be so powerful you can, be able to beam to your TV, whatever. We can have those like futuristic conversations. 10 years is that weird in between state between then and now. I can't imagine people who are super well informed being able to accurately predict what the market's going to be like. Let alone a government regulator being able to predict what the market needs to defend itself on that scale. So yeah, it's just a tough one. All that said, I'm glad that they're having these conversations. I'm glad that they're willing to investigate, and even if they are saying, hey, we'll take Sony at their word at what they're saying at face value, they are still just investigating. I don't expect this to amount to much more than maybe a couple of concessions that are just written into a legal agreement that applies in the UK and then is applied broadly worldwide because the UK is such an important market. So we'll see what happens next. Moving on, Facebook announces the Meta Quest Pro. Some details here. It is $1,500. That's the big one. It uses the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2. That's XR as in mixed reality. So it's a mixed reality processor, out of the box. The XR2 5G has 256 gigabytes of storage, 12 gigabytes of RAM, some QLED panels. I guess that's not OLED though, so that's a bit of a bummer, a bit of a weird thing, because OLED's such a good thing when you have it up to your face. But it then has things like 10 sensors for IR, depth projector tracking, and it can also do the thing where it really is just going to give you the mixed world view, so it'll beam through the world around you and then put mixed reality polygonal objects on that world and be able to track it accurately. This isn't for most of us, right, Andy? This is for like businesses are maybe going to get these for a certain type of office worker. I guess I don't really know. What do you think?
I mean, the first thing I thought, to be completely honest, is looking at that price tag is how much is PSVR 2 going to cost?
Same. Absolutely. Like, oh man, that's
these specs are
worse
money than PSVR 2. I mean, obviously, this is a standalone headset.
Right. This has a really good smartphone inside of it, which the PSVR 2 will not have. But still, the PSVR 2 specs, like you said, other than that, are off the chart compared to this. So. Like PSVR 2 is not going to be $1,500, but could be easily $600, right?
Yeah, that's quite scary to think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good thing ultimately. Like about VR, like I'm not. VR is one of those things where I wish I was into VR. I've got a Valve Index, and Half-Life Alyx is one of the best games I played in the last couple of years. It's just incredible experience. And you look at some of these VR games now as well, they're not primitive anymore. They're really maturing and they look incredible. I mean, some of the VR games I saw at Gamescom were mind-blowing. And obviously, I mean, Oculus is the market leader, right? So PlayStation coming back now is really, really good for the whole space, because it's just going to kind of get more bums on seats and kind of, competition is good for everyone, etc. And the other thing worth noting is that VR is a profitable space now, right? There are big companies that just make VR games and they make money, and that's not necessarily true for a lot of the other stuff we talk about, like cloud streaming, etc. and things. I mean, Stadia's just
a lot of developers did get scared away, so it's profitable. And if you are willing to be one of those VR studios, chances are you are going to be competing in a much less crowded market. So there's some benefits to making those games. The ceiling is clearly not as high. If you were to put out a free-to-play game with microtransactions that was for VR, you couldn't make $1 billion a year like some mobile phone games. But if you make a game as a product, VR seems like a pretty good space for that right now, especially with PSVR 2 and this on the horizon, right?
I think they've just been figuring out what the market is, right? Like exactly what you just said, that maybe it is more of a core thing. Maybe you are making these kind of AAA, so to speak, kind of productions for people who are going to pay $1,500 for this thing. I mean, I was always waiting for what's going to be the Wii moment, the App Store moment that's really going to take this mainstream. And perhaps that isn't coming, and that's okay. That's okay that there's a different space for people who love those types of games, because that's really what kind of the Wii and the App Store did all those years ago, which is broaden what games were, who they were for, and that there's lots of types of different games for different people.
Yes, exactly. And when it comes back to the pro, though, I think that pro word is hard to pin down, because we do get things like the PlayStation 4 Pro, and that was not meant for professionals. We get the iPhone Pro Max or whatever, and that's not meant for professionals or maximalists. It's just like marketing terms that get thrown around. In this case, this does feel like they are mostly aiming it at people who would be working in a professional setting, and that goes with the price. Like, this is going to be an enterprise tool, at least at first. And then if you want to buy it, if you're someone that does have that kind of money sitting around and you want to use this as your way of getting into Quest, well, that's fine. But if you want like the some of the benefits, like the enhanced controllers that I think come with this, well, those are backwards compatible with the Quest 2, and you could just keep using the Quest 2. And the Quest 2 got a price increase recently. Doesn't feel like it's going anywhere anytime soon. So you're fine if you want to have the more affordable option here and access some of the new stuff that might be coming because the Quest Pro exists. But we'll see. More Meta news and Facebook VR news. Meta acquired Camouflage, which is Iron Man VR, and that game will be coming to Quest devices. Twisted Pixel, which made Splosion Man. They've made some other VR games recently. And Armature Studios, which is comprised of many of the people that previously worked on Metroid Prime. They are also the studio that did the development for Recore. Not the design, but they did Recore, right? That's as far as I can remember.
They're the Metroid Prime guys, yeah.
Yes, they're the Metroid Prime guys there in Austin and surrounding areas in Texas. Meta says it'll be a while before they can reveal what they're working on. However, the studios are going to bring to VR what the company calls ambitious and forward-thinking games. We talked a little bit about these acquisitions on the Bombcast yesterday. I just kind of wanted to bring it in as part of the VR news today. I suppose this is more another indicator of what we were just saying, that investment into VR gaming is not going away. Sure, it pulled back from the days of the heady days of 2016, where this was definitely the future. Now this just feels like another way for businesses to make some solid money, and that's reflected in a deal like this, right?
Those are excellent acquisitions, right?
I think those are pretty well targeted. Yes, those are like precision strikes of acquisitions. I agree.
Obviously, recently those guys have been making VR games, but before that, they were making like really strong, kind of new IPs. They're experienced developers. I think that they would be a pretty good boon for any platform holder. I mean, to be completely frank, I mean, this is my kind of get out of jail card. But as someone who doesn't play a lot of VR games, I'm just a little bit sad that those guys are now going to be making just VR games.
I agree. I was always happy when I would see Armature pop up on like, oh, we're working on this thing. I'm like, oh, good. Those Metroid Prime devs.
I was praying for them to kind of go back and do some stuff with that, because I mean, obviously they're not the whole team, but it's the real leads there.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, what suits VR more than looking out of a helmet space shooty game, right?
Yep. I would really enjoy them to kind of take those concepts and apply it to something new for VR. That could be very cool. I mean, just a Metroid-like, where it's much more focused on the scanning stuff from Prime, that would be great for a VR game, where it's like, hey, you're just walking around an environment, scanning stuff, and yeah, sure, there's some backtracking and getting around. VR can do that stuff pretty cool as well, as I saw some early escape room games that got adapted to VR. But mostly just, give me that scanning tool in an Armature game. Sure, I'll tune it.
Because I don't have to move, basically.
Exactly.
I feel like VR games have moved beyond me.
I'll move around in the rolly chair a little bit. That's all I can promise. Otherwise, you're out of luck, VR game developers. One last piece of VR news. Among Us VR, which has been previously announced, got a release date November 10th. It's coming to Quest and PC VR. It'll also be there for PSVR 2 at launch for $10. It includes in-game voice proximity chat, which is one of those things I always really, really like, where you can hear someone getting further away from you, and the voices bounce around the environment in a relatively realistic way. And these are the voices of the people you're playing with.
You ever play the old Splinter Cell multiplayer games, or Pandora Tomorrow, was it?
Right, Splinters. Yes, I only played them a little bit with some friends that would try to Sherpa me around and try to get me into them. But I do know that they really like this aspect of it, like of hearing people come around.
I'm showing my age probably, but that was like such a cool thing at the time, that if you played as a spy and you kind of snuck up behind the mercenaries, which played in first person mode, that you could speak to them, before you killed them.
Yes,
and that was like, wow, such a cool feature.
I love that. There was a couple of Call of Duties, I think, that when you killed someone, their death mic would come through and you could hear them screaming at you. And I always like that too.
It's the absolute best feature.
Yes. I'm glad they still do that. Wonderful. But like having proximity chat the entire time is gonna, I think, make this very, very neat. I'm ready. Cool. I'm ready for Among Us VR. I want to spend some time in there. I'll get I got the index over in that corner behind that black couch right there, ready to go. I'll just plug it in and I'll play some Among Us. That'll be fun.
Do you know what's great about that game, as someone who's not into VR games, is that kind of Among Us is more about watching it than playing it anyway, right? And that's going to be like really entertaining to watch.
I do wonder about that. Do you think that they will have tools in there for streaming it, so it's not just from like a player perspective and it'll be all wobbly and looking around? Like maybe they could have like a third-person camera tool.
So. That's a good point. They must be thinking about that, right?
Yes, I think they're thinking about that.
That's their success.
Right.
I'd watch that.
Yes, I like having a even if it's someone, even has to be like another player who just is watching everything and you're watching the stream from their perspective. Like I would take that, but it'd be nice if there was like some AI tool that could just sort of track people as interesting things are happening from a the God's eye perspective. That would be cool. So we could see what AOC is really doing when she goes to play this game.
They're not thinking about that. They should be.
Yeah, they really should be. Finally, Xbox Cloud Gaming is coming to the MetaQuest store to round out our VR section, actually. I mean, hey, you could stream games from Xbox Game Pass to your MetaQuest into a virtual TV. It's not going to be 3D, not going to have any depth. I'm probably never going to use this, but whatever. It's options if people want to. I mean, if you are traveling and for some reason you can't get your Xbox Game Pass stuff up onto the hotel TV, putting on the headset to play these games over the cloud, I suppose I could see a possibility for that. It just feels like such a subsection of a subsection of people that would ever use something like this, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like putting Xbox Game Pass on your like Bugatti, right?
Yes, yeah, a little bit.
I mean, it feels a little bit OTT, but there used to be a sort of audience for this, didn't like 10 years ago, Sony used to do headsets just for sort of like watching movies.
Yeah, they had those glasses that would put a like 75-inch projection TV like 5 feet away from your head. Those things I started seeing them on TikTok again recently. So other companies have picked up that mantle. I'm like, it's interesting. Those things still exist in some
That could
form.
be a thing, right? I mean, if you forget about the cloud, I mean, I think for that headset, it was good for like plane travel, right? You kind of stick it and you watch a movie, which you probably wouldn't be able to do if it was cloud gaming. But if you're sat in your living room and you've got, the rest of your family got something on your TV, maybe.
Yep, maybe. All right, let's move on to some of the other news. Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale is closing already. This comes from a tweet here. We are regretful to announce that we will be ending service for Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier, on January 11th, 2023. We would like to thank you all for your support over the past year. The game will be just over a year old when it closes down. I installed this game when it was in the preview period on Android, and I was like, I should play that and I should stream that. That would be funny. And I never opened it, and it's been sitting on my phone ever since. I've never once opened it. And now here it is. It's closing. It's all my fault, Andy. I don't know why I did this to this game.
Oh, I mean, it feels like, was anyone asking for this game? I mean, it was so crazy it could have worked, but I just don't.
It should have been on console. Like, they should have just put it on console as well. I don't get it.
100%.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, I mean, there's this, the industry is littered with these service games that have troubled launches, right? And then a lot of them end up being great because you don't give up after 3 months. You kind of listen to your community, you sort them out. I mean, I acknowledge that this is probably a bit different. It's a mobile-only game. It's got a bit more attention because it's got such a huge franchise attached to it. I mean, you can't help but look at it in the same year as Babylon's Fall and be wondering, like, is this a trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was the trend in the opposite direction for a long time of, you're right, the developers stick with these games, they rescue them, and they find an audience because people people want a game that they can get into, and there's a lot of different kinds of people out there. So yeah, you stick with Rainbow Six Siege for long enough, suddenly 50 million people have played that game.
Destiny was awful at launch.
Yeah. And you know, some of those games, well, Destiny is one that you felt like Bungie could never, abandoning that game was never an option for them. That was never going to happen. But like Siege, like, yeah, maybe. And there's a lot of other games similar to Siege as well. But
Outriders is still going.
Yeah, right. And so like the developers are faced with this opportunity to, faced with the obstacle of resuscitating a game that maybe had a lackluster launch. You could see them talking themselves into maybe it's worth it to stick with it. That trend seems to be fading. It's waning, and we're now going back to, hey, if it's not great out of the gate for the most part, we are going to pull the plug. Even Ubisoft has started doing that in many cases, Hyperscape or whatever it was. So
I mean, I can't help but think that it's obviously it's coming the same week that we published a Platinum Games interview earlier this week. So I was talking to their CEO about Babylon's Fall, and you really had to kind of read between the lines of what he was saying, and he was very clearly saying, when I asked him what lessons have you learned, and it was like, do it ourselves, like do it in our own building with our own guys, and don't do this with another company again.
I imagine that working with the modern Square Enix is something of a hassle and something of an exercise in frustration. They don't want to fund these things. They don't want to stick with them. They do want to put them out. They do want to rush them out. I'll never get over Balan Wonderworld having a demo. Like a game that was just...
Demo was so bad.
For a bad game, and they're like, yeah, put out a demo. It was like, was no one paying attention to how bad and how much that was going to turn people off to that thing? Like, I mean, I get it. I'm glad there was a demo to help people convince not to buy the game, but it's just, it felt weird because if they had been paying attention to that game, they would have known how bad of an idea that was for them.
As someone who worked on a 3D platformer that kind of got mixed reviews, that it was astounding that they put that demo out.
Yeah, and your all's games blew Balan Wonderworld away. Like, honestly, it's Balan Wonderworld.
We're getting sidetracked, but I remember when we worked on our platformer, we spent probably the first 2-3 months. There's a guy called Chris Sutherland, so he did the movement in like all the Donkey Kong Country games. Banjo-Kazooie, he's a real absolute wizard, like gameplay programmer. He just spent like the first 3 to 6 months with a cube room, making them it fun to make them move. That was it. That is the first thing, the foundation of the whole 3D platformer. They have to be fun to move. And then it was just, so it was pretty surprising kind of playing that game where it's like, they're just not fun to move.
It's just not fun to move, and every button does the same thing. And sometimes there's no jump button for this one suit, and what are you doing here? Balan Wonderworld.
I feel bad for those guys, though.
I mean, that was a Square Enix thing, and I bet a lot of that stuff was probably out of their hands, out of the hands of the people who were designing it, out of the hands of the teams that came in to actually program take the designs and turn it into a game. They were just hired contractors for the most part. It's not their fault. The Sims 4 officially goes free to play on October 18th. This confirms reports from September 14th, whereas, this game's going to go free to play. On that day, I think is when they're doing a Sims event, and that is when we should also get a first look at Sims 5. At least that's what I was told previously. I think that's still on. I think they've mentioned this publicly now. If not, Sims 5 should be getting a quick little teaser at that point. But keep in mind, this is very early, very preliminary stuff, because that game is very early in development. Do not expect this to go from announcement to release in like under a year or anything like that. It'll take some time. In the meantime, though, Sims 4 going free to play and then having 50, 60, 70 pieces of DLC content, that's a pretty good business strategy as well. Get a lot of people through the door with Sims 4 and then saying, look at all this stuff you could spend extra money for, and hey, maybe here's a holiday sale, and all these things are discounted, and it still costs $120 to buy like 5 things or something like that.
It's surprising they didn't do that earlier, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, obviously, Sims 4 has found its stride, was very successful for EA and Maxis. So I'm not too surprised that they kind of stuck with their guns in terms of this is the strategy that's worked for us. We're not going to abandon it. But yeah, make that base Sims 4 free. And then, you really do have so many pieces of content to sell to people. It should work out fine. Let's see. EA Sports FIFA 23 delivers massive opening weekend. This comes from an EA press release. Today, Electronic Arts celebrated a record-breaking launch for EA Sports FIFA 23 with over 10.3 million players within the first week, signaling the biggest launch period in EA Sports FIFA franchise history. That number, 10.3 million, compares to last year's 9.1 million during the same period. So pretty significant increase of over 10%. This is a quote from that press release. The response from our fans has been nothing short of incredible, and we're thrilled that our community is playing with their favorite players and teams across FIFA 23 in record numbers. With both the men's and women's World Cup and exciting updates to our women's club football content and games still yet to come, we're just getting started on providing players with the most authentic and immersive experience yet. FIFA just continuing to chug along. I don't know if I heard much about the quality of this FIFA. I've not played it myself. I have it on Steam. I've not touched it, but I think that's usually a good sign when one of these annual sports games comes out and you don't hear a lot of whining. It's just people putting their heads down to play right?
You only hear, for these kind of annual games, you only really hear when it's bad.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, my guys play it a lot, and the impression I get is that it's very, very good. The momentum behind football is kind of gets bigger every year. It's one of those things, right, that especially in a games medium where the audience grows older, because kind of old guys like me are still playing FIFA, and there's younger guys kind of coming in and playing it as well. I think just generally it's an exciting time around the sport. I think it's the first time that a FIFA game has had both the women's and the men's World Cup.
Yeah.
Obviously England, the English kind of women's team won this summer, which is a big deal and a big market for this game. And it's just, it's a really interesting narrative playing out, isn't it, about what's, how they kind of carry this through next year and how that's all going to play out. I mean,
yeah.
I guarantee you, I'm not sure how much you're into, kind of football / soccer, but FIFA, how inept and brazen FIFA are.
Yes.
It's going to be an entertaining couple of years, I think. They've already put out a statement kind of saying that we're the only one and we're going to make a game in 2 years. And
they sounded like Donald Trump, which is always the sign that things are going to go well for whatever you're going to do next. Obviously, what we're referring to here is that the next soccer game, football game from EA is not going to be a FIFA game. Next year, it will be something else, EA Football Club. I think they confirmed that publicly, but that was, the name that was...
EA Sports FC,
Yeah, EA Sports FC. And that transition it will be a little bit challenging, but I think all the momentum is still on EA's side. There's very little chance that they are going to lose any significant portion of this audience. Maybe it won't do 10.3 million next year, but I don't think they're suddenly going to turn around and be like, oh, this game's not selling because it doesn't have the FIFA name, which is literally the only thing.
I'm fascinated with how it's going to go, to be honest, because the EA Sports brand is, it's still really big. I mean, if you watch football over here, all of the referees are branded with EA Sports. They have been for some years. All of the kind of the UI elements, you don't want to tell them that on the TV, the kind of the HUD elements on the TV have got EA Sports logos on them. So even to people who don't play games, is a visible brand.
And EA Sports is kind of is like the positive side of EA, according to most gamers. Like, I mean, sure, there's a lot of issues with Ultimate Team stuff, and people feel like they're being manipulated and spend a lot of money. Yeah, but mostly people talk positively about EA Sports relative to just Electronic Arts proper. And so it feels like they should be able to take this and transition, especially because as people in chat are asking...
a free run.
Yeah, and people are asking, like, does this mean they're going to lose access to some of the FIFA club teams? And so, no, they're going to have all that stuff. It's literally just the FIFA name on the box and some branding within the game. But they went out there, they got deals for some of the leagues and some of the other competitions. All that stuff was all wrapped up, and the names of the players and the clubs themselves.
So it's a really shrewd decision, I think, because they paid billion for this.
A big price tag for that FIFA name. Yeah,
you have to see how much they sell. Kind of on an annual basis. I mean, they're saying 10 million players in the first week or whatever. And how much of that is down to FIFA, and how much is that down to the fact that they have the reputation for being the authentic game with all the players, all the stadia, and this is, to your point, they've been very clear in their kind of their messaging on kind of stepping away from FIFA that these are separate arrangements. We have all the players, we have all the teams, we have all the likenesses. The only thing that FIFA owns, other than the name, is like the World Cup, basically. So that's every 4 years they don't get the World Cup. They don't get FIFA on the box. And there's other restrictions that people wouldn't have seen. And they're alluding to them a lot of the time. It's not really clear, but you could kind of work it out, where they're saying restrictions of the agreement stop them from taking the game in certain directions. Because I'm guessing FIFA might want to license separately for, kind of maybe different kinds of games or different, kind of maybe cross-media stuff. So I think we might see next year them kind of do some quite exciting things that they couldn't do previously because they're restricted from the license.
Yes, I'm also trying to track. Someone mentioned they announced the PlayStation Plus games for next month, so I was trying to track that down real quick. Seems like a pretty lackluster month. I agree. I think that mostly what we're gonna have to see here is just how EA brings it out and does the big coming out party for the big changeover. I expect them to maybe amp up some of their marketing efforts and kind of do a barrage attack on sports fans with, hey, this is now EAFC. EAFC is going to be nonstop everywhere for the next year or two. And then it'll just quickly slot back into this being the authentic game. Everything that you mentioned there, as all the positive points, and they're going to be able to point to all those things are still true about this game and this game only. And if you want to go with whatever FIFA game is they're going to make, which I expect to be a complete travesty, it's going to probably be a joke. Yeah, go for it. Go and enjoy yourself. Have fun. But
I can't wait to see them try. I really can't.
Me too. Google announces the world's first laptop built for cloud gaming. That's their quotations there. 2 weeks after announcing Stadia's shutdown. Chromebooks will now support 3 leading cloud gaming platforms: Xbox Cloud Gaming, NVIDIA GeForce Now, and Amazon Luna, bringing with them full PC and console games straight from the cloud. I suppose that many of these things probably already worked on Chromebooks, but the fact that they're now marketing this is a sign that, hey, they've moved on from Stadia, but they still see an opportunity to incorporate cloud gaming into their marketing strategy for Chrome and Chromebooks and however that stuff works. This does feel a bit weird. It feels a bit weird, right? Yeah. I mean,
it's unfortunate, the timing, really. I mean, you might even kind of imagine that this might have even been a Stadia branded thing at some point.
Yeah.
It's awkward timing. I mean, the difference between this and a normal Chromebook, I think, is just it's got better Wi-Fi and better refresh rates on the screen. So that's better for streaming games, right? But I'm sure I read that these are like $700.
Yeah, not because if you get a $700 like Ryzen laptop, you're going to be able to do a lot of stuff locally, and then it will also have zero issue with cloud gaming. Like you could, so it's a rough price, but I mean, I don't know. Some people really like Chromebooks, I guess. A lot of people are growing up with Chromebooks in school, and maybe when they get to a point where they're like, it's time to pick something, well, I'm going to get a Chromebook. That's what I'm used to. Maybe they're counting on that, but I would never have any use for one of these. And obviously I'm a special case.
It seems to continue Google's trend in the game streaming space of in great tech, but everything else is awful, including the business plan.
Yeah, they're really good at the bits. When it comes to actually turning those bits into like physical atoms, they have a bit of an issue making that transition. And this is another example of that. A little update. This one comes from, I believe, from IGN. How PlayStation Studios Malaysia is playing a growing role in Sony's most important franchises. Some details here. Founded in 2020, PlayStation Studios Malaysia is the newest first-party PlayStation studio to be created from the ground up by Sony. Until recently, very little has been known about the projects this studio is working on, but now we know the answer. They're working on everything. Speaking during a panel at Level Up KL, and that's KL is in Kuala Lumpur, on Thursday, PlayStation Studios Malaysia head Hasnul Hadi Samsudin and Neil Ingram from PlayStation San Diego-based visual arts team explain how Sony's newest internal startup studio has been involved in working on first-party games like The Last of Us Part 1 and MLB The Show 2022, as well as playing a role in many of the other first-party titles from Sony. Samsudin has assembled his team of 77 employees under remote work conditions due to the pandemic, but they began working on this in person in the studio recently. This is a strategy I think companies are going to keep doubling down on, founding new studios in emerging markets with a lot of highly educated people, and using the salary arbitrage of saying, hey, it costs less to pay a person here to do the same work. We should just be opening our own studio, or at least contracting out studios there. But I think it's going to be much more common for Sony, Microsoft to open studios in these places and take advantage of these differences in pay, and it's going to work out for them because games are not going to get smaller. Even if new tools come along to make them easier to make, they are just going to keep increasing in scope, and you're going to need as much around the clock help on these games as possible. And obviously Kuala Lumpur's the studio, or I'm sorry, the Malaysian studio is going to contribute to that for Sony. Does this sound like a strategy that is going to continue working for a company like Sony?
I mean, as you kind of mentioned, there's been kind of a lot of companies who've opened studios in Malaysia, I believe, recently.
Yeah.
Because really, it's just another kind of episode in the kind of the new season of chasing talent. Because since the pandemic, since the money that's come pouring into games, since everyone's expanding, kind of opening studios, is that there's a real shortage of good talent. So this is an obvious step for that, is to go and expand in these different markets. I'd also say there's an undercurrent here that, from me personally, when I read this story, obviously it's great that they're a support studio now and they're kind of fulfilling that role. I would welcome any kind of different voice within kind of Sony's first party at the moment, because it feels like, especially compared to the old days, it's very westernized now.
But even in Western studios, like it's only a handful of Western studios, because the other team mentioned here, the visual arts studio based in San Diego, they were trying to step up and say, hey, let us make a game ourselves. And they kind of had that stuff sort of taken out from underneath them. Like they wanted to work on Uncharted. That didn't get very far. And there were some reports about, oh no, that was never going to happen. Well, Sony never thought it was going to happen. The visual arts studio team did think it was going to happen, and they were trying to make it happen, but they were kind of shot down. And Naughty Dog's like, no, we want to control this stuff. So it's like, it's just a handful of studios that get to be the big boys, and everyone else needs to work on their stuff, including the visual arts team, let alone a team in Malaysia, which feels like they would be so far down the list of potentially getting to work on their own stuff, right? And that's what you're talking about. I agree. I want to see different voices doing new and different things. And sure, it can all have that sort of Sony perspective of behind the back and, sad dads or whatever. But still, I think a new voices can do some wonderful things for that Sony first party offering.
I mean, that's what Sony's about now, right? They're the big blockbuster, blockbuster offering. They bring the biggest AAA games. So you can see from that perspective, if that's their MO, if you've got a studio that's perhaps like I hate this terminology, but it's easy to understand, like a AA size studio that's perhaps not, kind of 300 people, it's like 100 people, then, perhaps they might kind of overlook that. But yeah, I mean, I want to see that again, right? One of my favorite PlayStation games in a while is Returnal. And that was like made with like 100 guys. I mean, obviously they had help from XDev and other studios, but It's an interesting, unique game. And that's what PlayStation first party used to be about. And I think there is perhaps some fear now that it's just becoming a bit samey. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're putting out amazing games.
It's hard to complain about what it is, but still it does feel a bit
tick the right boxes.
You could see here's my thing with Sony first party. There's a reason God of War is going to be a 2-game series, and they are already promising not to do a third one, because they know the diminishing returns on doing that again are going to be so severe that it's not worth the money at a certain point. And we're right in this butter zone for Sony, where a lot of their big things are hitting the second game in a series, and they're bigger than ever, and that's great. But you get God of War 3, God of War 4, suddenly people are complaining, oh, is it just going to be this over and over again? And you can't, when games are this expensive to make, you kind of can't be in that position, which is why obviously Sony is expanding into games as a service and all that stuff. And I get that. I just think it would be nice if there was another path for them to do something different in their first party single player stuff. But obviously that's not something they need to figure out today, but it is something they need to figure out in the next couple of years. And I hope this is all part of that.
I mean, we could go. Sorry, go on.
No, please finish your thought while I figure out what I'm talking about next.
I was about to say we could go quite far down this rabbit hole about the state of kind of Sony's first party. So let's continue.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I know Malaysia, popular. Mexico has become a popular place to open new studios as support teams. So this is happening all over the world right now, and I guess we'll see what the next region will be when it comes to that. Haven Studios on machine learning's potential for players and developers. It's a headline about Haven Studios development ideas and what they think is going to be next for gaming. There's a specific reason I wanted to talk about this, but let's read some of these details first. In formally launching the studio's Montreal office space last week, Haven co-founder Jade Raymond said more than 30% of the studio is currently working on machine learning, artificial intelligence, and cloud-based development tools. Here's a quote from Raymond. "We really have this vision to bring a new type of player-centric, community-driven game to life. And to do that, these investments are very important." While it's not clear, and this is the quote's over, while it's not clear yet exactly what kind of payoff those investments will have, Haven shared an early look at technology that it believes could potentially be used in game development down the road. Haven director of creative machine learning, Logan Olson, started showing a brief clip from HBO's sci-fi show Westworld, where a person working with a futuristic interface describes a story and a computer generates a rough visual that adapts to those changing story details in real time. He said we're far from that, but that's the North Star. That's where they want to get to. And this is where I think this is a point I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially when I try to like talk to my my Google and say, "Hey Google, set up this calendar," and I'm like trying to figure out what it's capable of. But it's clear to me that the future, the biggest programming language of the future is going to be English. It's going to be speaking in probably English, maybe Chinese, but probably English to a computer, and the computer being able to parse what you're trying to say and building that thing for you. Computer, build me a world that is, an old Western setting. It's when that era is beginning to die, and give me a family that's struggling in an old home there. And you say these things, and the computer will begin processing that language in real time and show you that stuff. That is where developers want to move. It's where we're already moving right now with stuff like DALL-E, and people are like, well, this is not real art. It is going to be the future. It is the easiest. It's the easiest path between ideas and creation, and it's where developers want to get to. And machine learning can take us there. It's just there's going to be a lot of scary stuff between then and now, right? Where it's like, what happens to traditionally trained artists, and do we lose anything in that translation from being able to understand the way computers work to having computers understand the way we work? That does sound like there's potentially problems there. But we have a developer saying they're trying to make this happen now. And so to me, it feels inevitable. I don't know. What's your take on this?
I don't think this is a new thing. I think you're right. I think everyone knows that this is the future, right? Or is the future. But it's about who's going to do it right. You can see a lot of examples out of it now, and it's still pretty horrific, the stuff that it's coming up with.
Yes.
But if there's anyone you were going to bet on, it would probably be Mark Cerny, right?
Yes.
I think the most interesting thing about this story from my kind of business nose perspective is that obviously Sony puts these stories out. They don't do a lot of kind of like big PR drops that Xbox does. Xbox is very good at keeping Xbox in the news. Sony's a
Microsoft loves to announce things. Yes, it's my big thing. Yes, they love to announce things.
Sony, so it always intrigues me when Sony puts out stuff like this, where it's like, oh, we've opened our studio, the physical office, and we're going to talk about some AI. I mean, obviously the natural thought is that it feels like a recruitment drive. Then I guess when I thought more about that, I thought, well, maybe I guess that's the point, because this AI thing is going to solve the issue, right? Of like there's all these studios opening up. These big studios, and they just can't fill the kind of these senior roles since the pandemic. I mean, coming back to what I was saying earlier, I was speaking to a developer earlier this summer who was telling me that salaries in certain states in the US are going up like 20%, like every quarter, for these senior guys, because such is the demand to try and get them. You've seen like a lot of kind of big companies establish new studios and have struggles. I mean, say 343, for example, trying to build this big service game and attract these kind of experienced guys. So that's what I thought my immediate sense. But it reminded me of Brendan Green, the Mr. Player Unknown.
Yeah,
he did a interview with a journalist called Nathan Brown recently. He runs a newsletter called Hit Points, so do check it out if anyone gets a chance. It's very good. And his game is also kind of using AI to kind of generate content. I found it quite interesting from his perspective, because he's trying to make an Earth-sized game.
Yes.
And he's like, well, the only way you could do this is with having it generated by AI. So they're feeding in these instructions to these kind of AI generators, saying, look, this is how an animal works. It needs to sleep, and then it will need to eat, and then it will need to mate, and then it kind of spits out some animals. In theory, it's all theory right now. That's the bottom line to what you were saying, really, is that it sounds great for those sorts of games. I think maybe there could be a real hit that comes from this, like this big Earth-sized game that's so realistic and so detailed that you've never seen it before. But perhaps not for some of my favorite games, like Mario 3D World behind you. You don't really want that being.
Won't stop playing it. Yep.
My kids love it as well. You don't want like really an AI generated platformer, do you?
No, yeah, and I think that's the rub, is that we've found in gaming that a lot of times new ideas come along and they don't necessarily replace the old ideas. A lot of times things exist side by side, but investment does get pulled away slowly over time from some older ideas, and we get less of those games. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't, but the console gaming really did eventually kill arcades. That really did happen. And there's nothing that says the same thing can't happen to the kinds of games we like today. Something could come along and do things in a way that they make so much more money, or they're so much more cost efficient to produce, or a combination of the two. And the things that we do like could go away. Now, this is a slippery slope argument. And we need to be able to like see exactly what's going to happen there. I need to see what can happen with these games and if they would be things that people even want to play in the first place. But, Fortnite does make it very hard for a Battlefield 2042 to succeed. And the next time is, what's that Battlefield game going to look like from EA next time? Probably a lot more like Fortnite in terms of its structure and its monetization stuff. So these things do morph, and companies respond to the market over time. So if these new tools come out, they could change the way things work. But I also think that if we continue, like what people were saying about consoles in 2013, before the PS4 and the Xbox One came out, this is the last generation of consoles. No one cares about them anymore. Everyone's just going to be on their phone. And the response to that was a resounding no. That's not the case. We want these kinds of things. We're going to spend money on them. Therefore, you're going to keep making them. And that's the world we live in now. So,
I mean, what I would say is that obviously Sony are the ones on the front line making these big blockbuster games. So if there's anyone that needs this sort of technology, it really is PlayStation.
Yes.
I mean, we were talking about San Diego's studio there and like, oh, maybe they didn't have enough people to make their own game. Well, this takes that away, right? Where you have a smaller team that could perhaps utilize this technology to make something great and kind of solve a lot of issues. Also, I would say if there's anyone in this entire games industry who understands the process of making a game, it's Mark Cerny.
Yes.
I mean, there's a method called the Cerny method that's been utilized for like 20 years. People have been making games under the Cerny method.
It's what Respawn does. Yes, it's what Respawn. Respawn adopted that. Yes.
It's basically where they know exactly what they're making before they go into full production, right? It's like an extended pre-production.
They prototype for it at least as long as they're going to actually be in production, and the prototyping stage is long and elaborate, and it's free form, and they write down every good idea, every medium idea, and they know like, hey, this is the stuff we're actually going to put into this game, and it's the best of the best from the prototyping stage. And Cerny is basically the architect of the way people make games today, or at least the way people have found to be one of the best ways of making games. And EA is completely reshaping the way they make games based on what Respawn did, which was based on what Cerny did. So you're right. Like I do have some faith in Cerny kind of figuring out what game development needs next. And I would
never ever underestimate that guy. I mean, if he's involved, then it's probably going to be at least half decent.
All right, let's wrap up the show with one last news story. PC players are frustrated with the new No More Heroes 3 port on PC. It got some graphical updates for the PS5 and Xbox versions, I believe. But the PC version is pretty much just a straight port of the Switch game. So there's some examples here where it's like, there's some improvements in the background on PS5, but the Switch doesn't have anything in the background, and neither does the PC, because the PC is just running what's on Switch. A bit of a bummer. Funny. Yeah, this is
there's whole buildings and stuff in the background that are just not there.
Exactly. Yes, and it's the console ports was done by one team, the PC port was done by another, and it seems like they just kind of didn't invest in it in any grand way.
I imagine that this is going to get patched fairly quickly.
Yes, you would hope that it would be relatively simple. I hope it is, but I guess I don't know much about it. And I hope it's just a case of, okay, we can, increase the draw distance on the PC version too, and that solves this problem. Or maybe there's more to it than that. I guess we'll find out. Okay, I have the poll from just a century ago, and of course it got deleted here, so let me bring it back up. In the meantime, Andy Robinson, why don't you tell people where they can find you? And I really appreciate you coming on the show. Anything you want to plug, tell the people about?
So yeah, my website is VGC. It's videogameschronicle.com. So yeah, come and see me over there. I'm on. I think my handle on Twitter is andyplaytonic.
You got anything? You got anything you're looking forward to this holiday? Any games? Any new events happening? I know you said you were
just glad that there are games.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, last year, the pandemic is. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we're in one of the way more fortunate spaces to be during the pandemic. I mean, games were booming. Sure. People were reading about games. People were at home playing games. But certainly, it's caught up to us. Last Q4 was really dull. I think we had Halo came out in December, and then we had Battlefield, which was disappointing. And it's, we had a really great first 3 months of the year. Then it's been a really quiet summer, but it's exciting again. I mean, looking at kind of the review code coming in at the moment and the stuff that's coming up, it feels like getting back to a proper Q4. And then we're going to be probably have a really good Q1 again. And we're going to be in the position finally for the first time in 4 years where we can have an E3 coming up. Are people going to start talking about E3 again in kind of February, March, and building up to that?
Yep.
So it's a good time.
I'm looking forward to it. We're going to try to start some E3 conversations here in the next couple of weeks after we figure out what we're doing for Game of the Year. But after getting together, last week and having such success with that, it's like we need to find some tent poles across the year to find reasons to get back together and do some stuff, and do that 3-4 times a year. That could really just link everything together and feel like, okay, yeah, this is Giant Bomb. This is a website about video games. All right, I have the poll from just forever ago. Are you as excited about PSVR 2 as you were for PSVR 1? 61.9% said no. 38.1% said yes. This was a vague question, and a lot of people told me that, and I am just going to say, okay, well, so what? Yeah, answer it however you feel you need to answer it. I think in general, people are probably reserving judgment until they know the price, right? You're how can you be? You can't let yourself get over unless you are sure, no matter what the price is going to be, you want this thing. But we haven't even seen games that I think would justify that at this point for PSVR 2. It's just been a couple of ports from the Quest at this point. So I guess we'll have to see what happens next with that. How are you feeling about PSVR 2, regardless of what the price is? Are you ready to get one, or are you in wait and see mode?
I didn't really enjoy the last PSVR. I thought in the end it was just really underpowered compared to kind of what was out there in the PC space. I think it was a different time as well. The VR space was still really figuring itself out. I think it could be really kind of transformative for that market. Kind of as I said at the top of the show, they were the biggest player. I mean, Oculus are now the biggest player. Having them back in is only going to be good. The thing I'm curious about is that don't think it's anything that any other platformer would do who wasn't part of a larger electronics company. It does seem like a bit, at a time when we've just been talking about how they're looking at AI to get their games out, right? They're big, massive games. So, I can't help but feeling that it does seem like a little bit of a distraction for a company that can't get enough games out on PS5 at the moment. But oh, hey, I'm judging it before we've seen everything. I'm sure Jim Ryan said that they had around 20 launch games planned for this thing. So there's a hell of a lot yet for us to see. I mean, another Astrobot would sell me.
I myself muted. Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, where it's like I need to see more. I need to see that the next Astrobot game is going to be a full-fledged sequel, and if that's the case, then I got to play it because I love Astrobot games. But we haven't seen anything like that. We haven't even seen promises of ports like Half-Life Alyx. So we'll have to wait and see. All right. So the question for tomorrow: what's the price of the PSVR 2? Is it equal to or less than 400, 500-ish, or equal to or greater than 600? Let's see here. There we go. I'm gonna post that. We will answer that tomorrow. In the meantime, Andy, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I had a really great time talking about video games with you.
Did I, mate? Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'll try to have you back on again sometime soon. Everyone, on Giant Bomb for the rest of today. Let's see, I put it down here. There's a lot happening. We have Arcade Pit. We will be playing Eternal Darkness with Jeff Bancalar after that. There's a new episode of Al Bummer going up. And then tonight, our Make Good, we did reach our goal for this during the Great Giant Bombathon, but the computer exploded in our face, so we couldn't do it then, so we're going to do it tonight. The Roadhouse Film in 40s live. So if you have Amazon Prime, you could watch along live with us, or if you have it at home and you just want to sync it up, you can do that. We'll be talking over it, having a good time. I'm really looking forward to this one. So the Roadhouse Film in 40s live. I think we're starting that at I don't know, like 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure the exact time, but yeah, tune in. All those details are on the site. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.